Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Barbara Claypool. I've been at the church for a little over 30 years. I'm officially known as the Director of Music, but I prefer my informal title, which is Choir Mother. 30 years ago, we started out with an all-paid singer choir, an all-voluntary singer choir. We had Tawny Rushing had a keyboard that she played. We had no pianos. We did not have the Allen organ, and the Henry Urban organ was in disrepair. Today, we are made up of predominantly all-paid singers in our choir, except for 3 ancient people like me who still volunteer. They are a multi-talented group, and they are so delightful to be around, and they teach us so much as far as music ability. They not only sing, but they also play instruments. They are just a wonderful young group of adults. So all they come together, the main purpose on Sunday morning is to make a joyful noise unto the Lord. And so today we're going to give you an extra special treat. One of our tenors, Seth Younglove, is going to sing 2 songs written by Gabriel Fauré, a French composer. Seth just graduated from College of Charleston in voice, and one of his requirements last week was to present himself with a variety of songs for his senior recital, and he sang these songs then. He was in our church, and it was absolutely beautiful, and I thought y'all would love to hear him today. He is going to be accompanied, Seth sings tenor, and he is Corey Campbell, who is another one of our tenors, who also happens to play the piano and the guitar. So please give both of these young men a warm welcome for today.
messieurs, nous vous souhaitons de bienvenue à cette église très historique, les membres, les invités, les membres de Société Huguenote de South Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to this historic church. Good morning. Members, guests, and members of the Huguenot Society of South Carolina. I am Stephen Booker, and I have the honor of introducing to you Luc. Luc is a native Frenchman. He hails presently from Lyon and will be one of our liturgists. But he's going to get up here for a few minutes, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the historic region in France where his family is from, the Cévennes, and particularly the village of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, which is the village where the Huguenot people were responsible for saving about 5,000 children from the Holocaust, that village being one of two places that has been designated as righteous among the nation at Yad Vashem in Israel. And now, avec grand plaisir, permettez-moi vous présenter Luc.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So, as Stephen mentioned, I'm French, and my ancestors hail from a region of France which is located about 2 hours east from Lyon, and it's a region that was historically Protestant, Huguenot. So, as you know, the Huguenots were at some point in France about 10% of the population, so quite a substantial number. They were very influential across many different fields, and following the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, a lot of them, several 100,000 of them, fled France. Many of them came here to Charleston, and they were a blessing for all of the countries that hosted them. However, some Huguenots could not take the boat and leave. Many of them were living more inland, and many of them were actually peasants. And for them, the land that they worked was the only thing that they had. They had no skills that they could bring to the convert to the Catholic faith, or to practice their faith in a way that would be hidden from the authorities. So a lot of them in that region of the Cévennes, which is in the south of France, were hiding in the forests and in wild places to go and pray. They used to call that the desert, as a reference to the exile that the Israelites had to go to. And so even though they faced many harsh persecutions, especially in the early 1700s, they managed to hold on to their faith and even to wage some wars against the French royal troops that were highly trained, and they were only peasants, but they managed to fight off for several years against thousands of highly trained soldiers. And it's very important to understand that story because it's going to give us a reason or explanations why this village of the Chambon-sur-Lignon and others in the neighboring village were able to achieve such an heroic act during World War II. Because this location in the Cévennes was a hiding place for many of the Huguenots who wanted to keep on practicing their faith amidst of the persecution. The location was advantageous for hiding because it was a mountainous region. So it was also isolated and remote area, far from the principal axis of communication. So because of that, it was an ideal place for hiding. Interestingly enough, when later on in the late 1700s the French Revolution started, and the persecution was not against the Protestants but against the Catholics, especially the Catholic priests, this same place became a hiding place for Catholic priests. So quite amazing to think that they were not bitter and they actually hid some Catholic priests. So later on, fast forward a couple of centuries, 1940, as you know, the World War II is raging in Europe. France has lost the war against Germany. And at that time, what happened is that there was a separation of France in two parts. You had the north, which was occupied by Nazi Germany, and in which the German Gestapo and the German police had really free reins to do whatever they wanted. And the south region was called the Zone Libre, and it was a region administered by a collaborationist regime called the Vichy regime. So it was still France, and it was, although there was some level of collaboration with Nazi Germany, it was a lot freer, and the German police was not allowed actually to act in that region. The Chambon-sur-Lignon, the village that I'm talking about, was in the Zone Libre. And very, very early on, it was recognized by several people, actually including some American and English churches, as an ideal location for a place to hide and shelter refugees, whether they be Jewish or others. So at that time, the village was about 2,500 villagers, and it was at its head was a pastor called Pastor Trocmé, and that pastor was very active in spearheading the movement of this Pacific resistance to the persecution of Jewish people and other refugees. So it was quite an ideal location for hiding people, because this village had been known for its very pristine air and environment, which was very good for sick people. So they had a lot of location, housing for people who were sick, and so they decided to use those facilities to shelter Jewish children, especially. So the people in that village were all very proud of their faith and very active in their congregation, and they were very willing to help and shelter some of those Jewish children in some of their farms, in some of their houses. So actually, what happened during the services, at the end of the services of Pastor Trocmé in the church of the Chambon-sur-Lignon, he would ask among his congregation whether anyone had any room for what he called an Old Testament, which was a code word for a Jewish children, or Jewish child. And many among the congregation were willing to hide some children. So there was some backlash from the French authorities, and at many times there were some attempts to raid the town with because they were not making any secret about the fact that they were hiding children. Jewish children, and the police tried many times to go around town and just trying to find Jewish children. They never found a single Jewish children. Never a single villager was a whistleblower of any sort, which is pretty amazing when you think of it. Not a single one. And that dates back from the time where like it had been a hiding place for the Huguenots. They knew what it meant to be persecuted for their faith. And because of that, they were very understanding of what the plight of the Jewish people was. So at some point, the police came to Pastor Trocme and they asked him, "Where are the Jewish children?" And he said, I don't know what a Jew is. I know only men." And so that was the kind of like answer that they would give to the authorities. At some point, there was a ministry of youth of the Vichy government who went to town to make a visit, and the young people of the church decided to give him a petition at the end of his visits of the village, and in that petition, basically, they were saying, "We have Jewish children in this village, and we are not going to give any one of them." And just a real act of defiance. And following that, the persecution started to be more active, and one of the cousins of Pastor Trocme was actually sent to a concentration camp, and he died there. Pastor Trocme himself was arrested. But nevertheless, this village was very successful in hiding several thousands of Jewish children that they would then transport to neighboring Switzerland, which was a neutral country. So because of these efforts, as Stephen mentioned, the government of Israel and the organization of Yad Vashem, which was created after the war, usually they had this title of Just Among the Nations that they awarded to individuals who had risked their lives to help and save Jewish people. And for the first time, it was awarded to an entire village because it was a lot of hidden figures, people who didn't want to claim any glory for what they had done. They just believed that it was the right thing to do. So they decided to award it to the entire village, which was the first time. And recently, actually, there was an interesting story in the media. It was Christmas of 2020. There was a Jewish man from Austria who bequeathed 2 million euros to the entire village. And this was quite of a strange story at first when you think of a small village in the middle of nowhere in France, which was being bequeathed several $1 million by an Austrian man. So it made the headlines of actually several major media outlets, and it was a good reminder of like what happened there and how grateful some of the Jewish people, because this man had actually been hidden in that village, and he was so grateful for it that he could think of no best way to give his money away than to this village. So yeah, that's the amazing story of the Chambon-sur-Lignon. And I think it's a great testimony of what people can do when they hold on to their faith. They stay faithful to what the Bible teaches, and yeah. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Invocation, invocation. Notre secours est dans le nom du Seigneur, Créateur du ciel et de la terre. Amen. Prière, prayer. Prions. Dieu Tout-Puissant, notre Père céleste, nous sommes ici réunis pour sanctifier ensemble ce jour du Seigneur, pour t'offrir nos louanges et nos prières et pour entendre ta sainte parole. Tu as promis d'écouter avec bienveillance tous ceux qui viennent à toi au nom de ton Fils. Nous te supplions donc d'abaisser sur nous le regard de ta miséricorde, de purifier les pensées et les affections de nos cœurs, afin que nous puissions célébrer aujourd'hui un culte qui soit agréable. Dieu merveilleux, nous nous humilions devant toi. Nous adorons ta majesté, nous célébrons ta sagesse, ta puissance et ta bonté qui rayonnent partout dans les merveilles de ta création et de ta rédemption. Nous reconnaissons ton amour dans toutes les grâces spirituelles et temporelles que nous recevons de ta main, mais avec tous les chrétiens assemblés en ce jour, nous te louons surtout d'avoir envoyé ton Fils dans ce monde pour notre salut et qu'il soit ressuscité des morts pour notre justification. Nous te bénissons d'avoir donné à sa glorieuse résurrection la ferme espérance en la vie éternelle. Ô Dieu, grande est ta gloire dans ton Église et la louange de ton nom retentit dans l'assemblée des saintes. Puissent nos actions de grâce monter jusqu'à ton trône. Rends-nous dignes de prendre part à la résurrection des justes et à la gloire du royaume des cieux, où Jésus-Christ nous a dévancés, où il vit et règne, où il est adoré et glorifié avec toi et le Saint-Esprit, béni éternellement. Amen. les 10 commandements, the Ten Commandments. Écoutez respectueusement les 10 commandements de la loi de Dieu, comme ils sont écrits dans le 20e chapitre du livre de l'Exode. Et Dieu prononça toutes ces paroles. C'est moi, le Seigneur, ton Dieu, qui t'ai fait sortir du pays d'Égypte, de la maison de la servitude. Tu n'auras pas d'autre Dieu face à moi. Tu ne feras pas d'idole, ni rien qui a la forme de ce qui se trouve au ciel là-haut, sur la terre ici-bas, ou dans les eaux sous la terre. Tu ne te prosterneras pas devant ces dieux, et tu ne les serviras pas, car c'est moi, le Seigneur, ton Dieu, un Dieu jaloux, poursuivant la faute des pères chez les fils sur les toits et 4 générations s'ils me haïssent, mais pouvant sa vitalité à des milliers de générations s'ils m'aiment et gardent mes commandements. Tu ne prononceras pas à tort le nom du Seigneur ton Dieu, car le Seigneur n'acquitte pas celui qui prononce son nom à tort. Que le jour du sabbat on fasse un mémorial en le tenant pour sacré. Tu travailleras 6 jours, faisant tout ton ouvrage, mais le 7e jour, c'est le sabbat du Seigneur ton Dieu. Honore ton père et ta mère, afin que tes jours se prolongent sur la terre et que te donne le Seigneur ton Dieu. Tu ne commettras pas de meurtre. Tu ne commettras pas d'adultère. Tu ne voleras pas. Tu ne témoigneras pas faussement contre ton prochain. Tu n'auras pas dévisé sur la maison de ton prochain, ni sur rien qui appartienne à ton prochain. Écoutez aussi ce qui dit notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ dans le 22e chapitre de l'Évangile selon Matthieu. Tu aimeras le Seigneur ton Dieu de tout ton cœur, de toute ton âme et de toute ta pensée. C'est là le premier et le grand commandement. Un second est aussi important. Tu aimeras ton prochain comme toi-même. De ces 2 commandements dépendent toute la loi et les prophètes.
The Confession. Confession. Mes amis, si nous confessons nos péchés, il est juste et fidèle, celui qui nous les pardonne, et qui nous purifie de toute iniquité. Confessons donc nos péchés humblement. Ô Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, nous confessons à ta majesté divine que nous sommes de pauvres pécheurs, nés dans la corruption et l'iniquité, enclins au mal et incapables de faire le bien par nous-mêmes. Nous reconnaissons que nous transgressons de nombreuses façons tes 5 commandements. Ainsi, attirant sur nous, par ton juste jugement, la condamnation et la mort. Nous sommes, ô Seigneur, sincèrement affligés de t'avoir offensé, et nous implorons ta miséricorde pour nous soulager de notre misère. Ô Dieu, Père miséricordieux, accorde-nous ta compassion au nom de ton Fils Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur. Pardonne-nous nos péchés, donne-nous la grâce du Saint-Esprit et augmente-la jour après jour, jusqu'au point où, reconnaissant sincèrement notre indignité et abandonnant nos péchés, nous puissions être remplis de ce divin chagrin qui transforme la repentance en salut et amène les fruits de la vertu acceptables à tes yeux. Au nom de Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur. Amen. The Lord's Prayer. Notre Père. Notre Père qui es aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié, que ton règne vienne, que ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain de ce jour. Pardonne-nous nos offenses comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Ne nous soumets pas à la tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car c'est à toi qu'appartiennent le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Mesdames et messieurs, permettez-moi de vous présenter Madame Cynthia Lawton.
Les symboles des apôtres, the Apostles' Creed. Je crois en Dieu, le Père Tout-Puissant, Créateur du ciel et de la terre. Je crois en Jésus-Christ, son Fils unique, qui a été conçu du Saint-Esprit et qui est né de la Vierge Marie. Elle a souffert sous Ponce Pilate. Elle a été crucifiée. Elle est morte. Elle a été ensevelie. Elle est descendue aux enfers. Le troisième jour, elle est ressuscitée des morts. Elle est montée au ciel. Il siège à la droite de Dieu, le Père Tout-Puissant. Et de là, il viendra pour juger les vivants et les morts. Je crois au Saint-Esprit. Je crois à la Sainte Église universelle, la communion des saints, la rémission des péchés, la résurrection de la chair et la vie éternelle. Amen. Prière. Let us pray. Seigneur Dieu, Créateur et Père de tous les hommes, tu as commandé que des prières et des supplications soient faites pour tout le genre humain. Nous te offrons nos intercessions pour la paix dans le monde, ainsi que pour le bonheur et la salut de tous les hommes. Ô Dieu, délivre de leur aveuglement spirituel toute la nation encore dans les ténèbres. Tu as tant aimé le monde que tu as donné ton Fils unique en victime non seulement pour nos propres péchés, mais aussi pour ceux du monde entier. Tu nous as enseigné qu'il est venu pour être la lumière des gentils et apporter le salut aux confins de l'univers. Il n'y a pas d'autre nom sous le voûte céleste donné aux hommes par lequel nous puissions être sauvés. Ô Dieu Tout-Puissant et Père miséricordieux, accorde-nous de tous nos frères puissent être un jour rassemblés par le nom de notre Seigneur, afin que toute la nation te connaisse et t'adore, toi, le Dieu unique et vrai, ainsi que Jésus-Christ que tu as envoyé. Ô Seigneur, tu es la source de toute puissance légitime et l'auteur de toute la sagesse dans le conseil des hommes. Nous te prions pour tous ceux qui exercent dans l'autorité dans le monde. Tu nous as enseigné dans la Sainte Parole que tu gouvernes les nations sur la terre et que les dirigeants doivent te servir et te obéir. Accorde-toi alors, Dieu Toute-Puissance, une connaissance de toi à ceux qui ne te connaissent pas et donne ta grâce à tous ceux qui gouvernent dans la crainte de ton nom, qu'ils pratiquent la justice, aiment la miséricorde et marchent humblement avec toi. Nous te prions de considérer avec bienveillance ceux qui, par la divine providence, exercent l'autorité dans notre patrie. Parlez de ta grâce afin que l'administration de la justice, le maintien de l'ordre, l'amélioration des lois et l'exécution du jugement et glorifie ton nom. Ô Dieu de miséricorde, aie pitié de ceux qui souffrent de la guerre, de la peste ou de tout autre flot, ainsi que tous ceux qui sont dans la détresse. Nous confions la veuve et l'orphelin, le pauvre et l'étranger, tous ceux qui sont en danger sur terre et en mer, tous ceux qui sont persécutés à cause de l'Évangile, tous ceux qui sont désespérés, l'enferme, le malade et le mourant. Réconforte-les, soulage-les allant leurs différents besoins et donne une heureuse conclusion à leurs épreuves et à leur détresse. Ô Dieu, écoute-nous avec bienveillance. Attends-nous ceux qui, maintenant, viennent de te offrir leurs prières. Ne rejette pas les supplications de tes serviteurs, mais accorde-nous les bénédictions que nous t'avons demandées et toutes les autres qui nous sont nécessaires dans nos prières. Au nom de Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur. Amen. The sermon hymn is number 217.
Shining world.
bénédiction, que la grâce de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ, l'amour de Dieu le Père et la communion du Saint-Esprit soient avec nous et avec ceux qui vous aiment dès maintenant et pour l'éternité. Amen.